The stars had watched Earth for a very long time. Deep in the cold darkness of space, far beyond what human eyes could see, the hegemony of 12 stars had been patient. Their ships moved silently through the void, their sensors pointed toward the small blue planet that orbited an ordinary yellow sun. For 300 years they had observed, they had studied, they had waited. Humanity was dangerous. The hegemony had seen it early. This strange species built weapons faster than they built homes. They fought wars over lines drawn on maps. They killed each other over ideas, over resources, over nothing at all. The Council of the 12 Stars had debated for generations about what to do with Earth. Some wanted immediate destruction, others argued for patience. In the end, patience won. "Let them destroy themselves," the old admirals said. "Why waste our ships when they will do our work for us?" And so the hegemony watched as humanity grew. They watched the first nuclear bombs fall. They watched the Cold Wars and the Hot Wars. They watched and waited for the right moment. That moment came in the year 2157. The third global collapse, as survivors would later call it, began with water. Fresh water became scarce. Nations that once traded peacefully now pointed guns at each other across dying rivers. The first shots were fired in Central Asia. Within 6 months, half the world was at war. It was not like the wars before it. This war had no rules. Cities burned. Governments fell. Nuclear weapons kept hidden for decades were finally used, not once, not twice, but hundreds of times across every continent. The hegemony watched their screens with cold satisfaction, as mushroom clouds bloomed across Earth like flowers of death. Disease followed the bombs, crops failed, infrastructure collapsed. In 10 years, the human population fell from 12 billion to less than 2 billion. The great cities became tombs. New York, Beijing, London, Cairo, all silent, all empty except for the dead. By 2167, the fighting had mostly stopped, not because peace had been achieved, but because there was no one left to fight. The survivors were too busy burying the dead and searching for food to continue killing each other. Admiral Vethkaros received his orders on a cold morning aboard his flagship, the Eternal Silence. He was old for his species. His scales faded to a pale gray, but his eyes were still sharp. He read the Council's message 3 times. "The humans are broken," the message said. "Their civilization is dead. Their population is scattered and weak. The time has come to complete what they started, cleanse the planet, leave no survivors." Vethkaros assembled his fleet. 47 capital ships, each one larger than the human cities that still smoked on Earth below. 2,000 support vessels carrying ground troops, atmospheric fighters, and enough firepower to burn the planet's surface to glass. The fleet translated into Earth's solar system on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. They passed the outer planets without slowing. Jupiter's storms meant nothing to them. Saturn's rings were merely obstacles to navigate around. Mars, with its ancient human colonies now dark and dead, received only a brief scan. Then they reached Earth. Vethkaros stood on his command bridge and looked at the planet on his view screen. Even from orbit, he could see the scars. Brown patches where forests had burned. Gray smears where cities had stood. The ocean still looked blue, but sensors showed they were full of poison and debris. "Begin scanning for population centers," he ordered. His officers worked quickly. Their instruments swept across continents, searching for heat signatures, radio signals, any sign of organized human life. What they found surprised them. "Admiral," one officer reported, his voice uncertain, "we are detecting strange structures across all continents. They do not match any known human building patterns." Vethkaros leaned forward. "Show me." The screen changed to show an aerial view of what had once been Europe. Between the ruined cities, covering hills and valleys and plains, were rows upon rows of small stone markers. Thousands of them. Millions of them. They appear to be grave markers, Admiral. Our analysis suggests they mark individual burial sites. Vethkaros felt something he had not felt in many years. It took him a moment to recognize it as unease. "How many?" he asked. "We are still counting, Admiral. Current estimates suggest over 1 billion individual graves across the planet. The humans appear to have spent significant resources marking and maintaining these sites, even while their own survival was in question." The Admiral stared at the screen. In his long career, he had cleansed 7 worlds. He had seen species surrender immediately. He had seen species fight briefly before accepting their fate. He had never seen a species that, while dying, took the time to carve names into stones. "They are sentimental creatures," he said finally. "It will make no difference. Begin the bombardment." But deep in his chest, in the place where his people kept their doubts, Vethkaros wondered if he was making a mistake. On the surface below, a woman named Amara Okonkwo stood at the edge of a mass grave outside what remained of Accra. She had dug many of these graves herself. She had carried bodies until her arms gave out. She had carved names until her fingers bled. Amara had been a general once, commander of the West African Coalition. She had fought in the collapse. She had killed and ordered others to kill. When the fighting finally stopped, she had put down her weapons and picked up a shovel. She was tired, tired in her bones, tired in her soul. Everyone was tired. The survivors moved through their days like ghosts, doing what needed to be done without joy or hope. They farmed the poisoned soil. They filtered the dirty water. They buried the dead. And they remembered. Every grave had a name. Every name had a story. Amara knew hundreds of these stories by heart. She whispered them to herself as she worked, keeping the dead alive in the only way she could. She was whispering one of these stories when she saw the flash in the sky. At first she thought it was lightning, but the sky was clear. Then she saw another flash and she understood. Something was falling from space. Something was hitting the earth. Amara felt fear, but it was a distant thing, small and weak. She had been afraid so many times during the collapse that fear had lost its power over her. She had lost her husband, her children, her parents, her home. She had lost everything that made life worth living. What more could the universe take from her? She watched as a distant city, what was left of Lagos, began to burn under the bombardment. She watched as the sky filled with alien ships she did not recognize. Then she turned and began walking toward the old military bunker hidden in the hills. She had work to do. The dead were watching, and she would not let them down. The invasion of Earth had begun. The aliens expected to find a broken species waiting for death. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The bombs fell for 3 days without stopping. From orbit, Admiral Vethkaros directed the destruction with careful precision. His officers identified every population center larger than 10,000 humans. They mapped the power grids, the water systems, the communication networks. Then they destroyed them one by one. Mumbai burned first, then Sao Paulo, then the refugee camps in Southeast Asia where millions of survivors had gathered after the collapse. The alien weapons were clean and efficient. They did not leave radiation like human bombs. They simply erased everything they touched. Vethkaros watched the destruction on his screens and felt satisfied. The humans were not fighting back. They had no ships, no orbital weapons, nothing that could touch his fleet. Their few remaining aircraft were primitive things that his fighters shot down easily. Their ground defenses were scattered and weak. "This will be over within 3 weeks," he told his officers. "Prepare the ground troops for final cleanup operations." But on the planet below, something unexpected was happening. Amara Okonkwo reached the bunker outside Accra as the sun was setting. The bunker was old, built before the collapse by a government that no longer existed. During the war, she had used it as a command center. After the war, she had sealed it and tried to forget it existed. Now she broke the seal and went inside. The equipment was dusty but functional. Generators hummed to life when she flipped the switches. Radio equipment crackled with static, and in the corner, covered with tarps, were the weapons she had hidden 2 years ago. She was not alone for long. Within hours, survivors began arriving. Some were soldiers who had served under her during the collapse. Others were civilians who had heard about the bunker through whispered rumors. They came on foot, on bicycles, on horses. They came carrying whatever they could find: old rifles, homemade explosives, farming tools sharpened into weapons. Among them was a man Amara had not seen in 2 years, Colonel Chen Wei, former commander of the Eastern Bloc forces. During the collapse, their armies had fought each other across 3 continents. Amara had personally ordered strikes that killed thousands of his soldiers. He had done the same to hers. Chen walked into the bunker with a dozen of his own people. He looked older than she remembered. His hair had gone completely white. His left arm was missing below the elbow, lost in a battle she might have ordered. They stood facing each other in the dim light of the bunker. "General Okonkwo," Chen said. "Colonel Chen," she replied. The silence stretched between them. 2 years ago, they would have killed each other without hesitation. Now they stood in the same room while alien bombs fell outside. Chen moved first. He reached into his pack and pulled out a bottle of water, clean water, rare and precious. He offered it to her. "I think," he said slowly, "that our war is over." Amara took the bottle. She drank half, then handed it back. "Yes," she agreed, "we have a new enemy now." That night, Amara sent out a message on every frequency she could reach. It was simple and direct. "All survivors, all factions, all nations. We are under attack from outside our world. The war between humans is over. Anyone who wishes to fight, come. Anyone who has weapons, bring them. Anyone who has knowledge, share it. We will defend our home together, or we will die together." The response came faster than she expected. From the frozen ruins of Moscow, a former Russian general answered. From the mountains of Switzerland, a group of scientists who had survived in underground laboratories made contact. From Australia, from South America, from scattered islands across the Pacific, survivors reached out, one by one. They had spent 2 years as enemies. They had killed each other's families, destroyed each other's cities, done terrible things in the name of survival. Now, faced with something from outside their world, those divisions meant nothing. The aliens wanted to destroy humanity. That made every human an ally. Admiral Vethkaros noticed the change on the 4th day of the invasion. His ground troops had landed near what the humans called Berlin. They expected to find scattered survivors hiding in the ruins, easy targets for cleanup operations. Instead, they found organized resistance. The humans attacked from hidden positions. They used explosive devices buried in the roads. They sniped from collapsed buildings. They fought with weapons that should not have hurt hegemony soldiers: sharpened metal, chemical explosives, even farming equipment modified into traps. And they did not retreat. Even when outnumbered, even when surrounded, the humans kept fighting. They fought until they died, and even then, some of them carried bombs strapped to their bodies. "They are suicidal," one of his officers reported, confusion clear in his voice. "They make no attempt to preserve their own lives. They simply attack until they are dead." Vethkaros watched the footage from the Berlin operation. He saw a human woman, no older than 20, charge a hegemony position carrying nothing but a bag of explosives. She was shot 17 times before she fell, and the explosion killed 4 of his soldiers. "They are not suicidal," Vethkaros said quietly. "They simply do not care if they die." This was something new. In all his years of cleansing worlds, he had never encountered a species that did not value its own survival. Fear of death was universal. It was the lever that every conquering force used to control their enemies. But these humans had no fear. They had already watched their civilization die. They had buried billions with their own hands. Death held no mystery for them, no terror. It was just another thing to be faced, like hunger or cold or grief. On the ground, Amara received reports from resistance cells across the planet. The news was mostly bad. Cities were burning. Millions were dying. The alien technology was far beyond anything humans could match. But there was good news, too. "We captured one of their ground vehicles," a voice from Australia reported. "It is damaged but intact. We are studying it now." "We have recovered alien weapons," another voice said, this one from Northern Europe. "They are complicated, but we think we can understand them." "We shot down one of their aircraft," a third voice added. "The pilot was killed in the crash, but we have the body. We are learning about their biology." Amara listened to these reports and felt something she had not felt in years. It was not hope. Hope had died long ago. It was something harder, colder. It was determination. The aliens had made a mistake. They had attacked a species that had already lost everything. A species that had nothing left to protect except the memory of what they had lost. She looked around the bunker at the faces of her soldiers, former enemies, former friends, strangers brought together by disaster. They were tired. They were wounded. Many of them would not survive the week. But they were not afraid. "We cannot win this war with strength," Amara told them. "They are stronger than us. We cannot win with numbers. They have more ships than we have bullets. We cannot win with technology. They are centuries ahead of us." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "But we can make them pay for every inch of ground. We can make this invasion so costly that they will think twice before attacking another world. We can show them that humanity does not go quietly into the night." Chen Wei stepped forward. "The general is right. We have one advantage the aliens do not understand. We have already survived the end of our world once. We know what loss feels like. And we know that giving up is not in our nature." Outside, the bombs continued to fall. But inside the bunker, something had changed. The scattered survivors of humanity were becoming something new. Not an army. Armies had ranks and supplies and chains of command. This was something older, something more primal. This was a species that had decided to fight back. 6 weeks into the invasion, Admiral Vethkaros lost his first major warship. The destroyer Swift Vengeance was patrolling low orbit over the Pacific Ocean when it exploded. There was no warning, no enemy contact on sensors, nothing. One moment the ship was there. The next moment it was a cloud of burning debris falling toward the water below. Vethkaros demanded answers. His officers investigated for 3 days before they found the truth. The humans had launched a nuclear missile. Not from a military base. Those had all been destroyed in the first hours of the invasion. The missile had come from a fishing boat, a small wooden vessel that the hegemony sensors had ignored because it seemed harmless. The boat had been carrying a nuclear warhead salvaged from an old submarine. The humans had modified it to fly higher and faster than its original design allowed. They had aimed it at the exact spot where the Swift Vengeance would be passing at that exact moment. The calculations required for such a shot were extremely complex. The humans had done the math by hand, using chalk and boards, because they had no working computers. "This is impossible," one of Vethkaros' officers said. "They should not have the capability for this kind of precision." But they did. And they proved it again 2 weeks later when a second destroyer fell to a similar attack. Then a third. Then a carrier, destroyed by a cargo plane filled with explosives that flew directly into its hangar bay. The pilot of that plane was a woman named Maria Santos. Before the collapse, she had been a commercial airline pilot. During the collapse, she had flown supply missions to refugee camps. After the collapse, she had buried her 3 children with her own hands. Maria volunteered for the mission knowing she would not survive. The report from ground observers said she was singing as her plane approached the alien carrier. singing a lullaby she used to sing to her children. The carrier's shields could not stop a physical object moving at high speed. The explosion killed Maria instantly. It also killed 2,000 hegemony soldiers and destroyed a quarter of the alien ground forces assigned to South America. Stories like Maria's spread across the planet. They traveled through radio messages, through runners, through whispered words passed from survivor to survivor. They became legends. They became inspiration. Dr. Yuki Tanaka heard Maria's story in an underground laboratory beneath what had once been Osaka. Yuki was a physicist before the collapse. She had studied energy shields for a military research program. During the collapse, she had lost her husband and her daughter to a bomb that she herself had helped design. That guilt had nearly destroyed her. For 2 years after the collapse, she had done nothing but tend graves and wish for death. The invasion changed that. Now she stood in front of a captured alien shield generator, studying its patterns with instruments cobbled together from salvaged electronics. Her hands shook constantly. Radiation exposure from the collapse had damaged her nervous system, but her mind was still sharp. The shields work on frequency, she explained to the small team of scientists around her. They block energy at specific wavelengths. If we can find the right frequency, we can build weapons that pass through them. Her team worked for 4 days without sleep. They had no computers, so they did the calculations by hand. They had no proper instruments, so they built their own from broken pieces of alien technology. They had no hope of survival, so they worked with the desperate energy of people who had nothing left to lose. On the 5th day, Yuki found the answer. "Here," she said, pointing to numbers written on a dirty whiteboard. "This frequency will pass through their shields. Any weapon tuned to this wavelength will hit them as if the shields did not exist." She transmitted the frequency to every resistance cell on the planet. Within a week, modified weapons were being built in caves, in basements, in the ruins of destroyed cities. The technology was simple enough that anyone could make it with basic materials. The tide of the war began to turn. Not quickly, not dramatically. The hegemony still had overwhelming firepower and numbers, but now their soldiers died when they expected to be safe. Their vehicles exploded when they should have been protected. Their superior technology no longer guaranteed survival. Vethkaros received reports of these losses with growing frustration. His invasion plan had assumed minimal resistance. His supplies were calculated for a 3-week operation. Now, 10 weeks in, he was running low on everything. "Request reinforcements from the Council," he ordered. The Council's response came 2 days later. It was not what he expected. "No reinforcements will be sent. The campaign has exceeded acceptable losses. Complete the cleansing with available forces or withdraw." Withdraw. The word hit Vethkaros like a physical blow. In 300 years of hegemony expansion, no cleansing fleet had ever withdrawn. The shame would follow him for the rest of his life. But the alternative was worse. If he continued the campaign, he might lose his entire fleet. Then the shame would follow him into death. He stared at the viewscreen, watching Earth turn slowly beneath his ships. Such a small planet, such a primitive species. How had it come to this? On the ground, Amara received word of the hegemony's supply problems from a captured alien soldier. The prisoner was young, barely adult by his species standards. He had been part of a patrol that walked into a trap near the ruins of Cairo. His captors had not hurt him. They had given him food and water. They had treated his wounds. This confused him more than violence would have. "Why?" he asked Amara through a translator device they had built from salvaged technology. "Why do you keep fighting? Your world is destroyed. Your population is decimated. You cannot win this war." Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she pointed out the window of the bunker where they were holding him. Outside, visible in the morning light, was a field of graves. Thousands of stone markers, each one carved with a name. "Do you see those?" she asked. The alien nodded. "Those are our dead, our families, our friends, our children." Amara's voice was calm, but something burned beneath the surface. "We buried them ourselves. We carved their names with our own hands, and we made them a promise." "What promise?" "That their deaths would mean something, that we would never give up, that we would keep fighting as long as there was breath in our bodies." Amara leaned forward. "You want to know why we fight? Because we have already lost everything. There is nothing you can take from us that we have not already lost. There is nothing you can threaten us with that we have not already survived." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the graves. Every one of those people died believing in tomorrow, believing that somehow, someday, things would get better. We will not let that faith be wasted. We will fight for the world they wanted to see, even if we never see it ourselves. The alien prisoner was silent for a long time. When Amara turned back, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not fear, not anger. Understanding. "My people," he said slowly, "have never lost anything. We have always been strong. We have always won." He paused. I think we did not know what we were fighting against." "No," Amara agreed. "You did not." She walked out of the room, leaving the alien to think about what she had said. Behind her, the war continued. Above her, the alien fleet still controlled the sky. Around her, millions of humans kept dying. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to certainty. The aliens were strong, but they did not understand what they had awakened. They had attacked a species that had already survived the end of everything. A species that had turned grief into armor and loss into fuel. They had made a very serious mistake. Lieutenant Commander Zixoth had served the hegemony for 40 years. She had participated in the cleansing of 3 worlds. She had seen species surrender, species flee, species fight and die. She thought she understood how inferior beings responded to conquest. Earth taught her that she understood nothing. She was captured during a night raid in what the humans called Norway. Her patrol had been tracking a resistance cell through frozen mountains when they walked into an ambush. The humans had dug tunnels beneath the snow. They had waited for hours in the freezing darkness, not moving, barely breathing. When they attacked, it was with weapons made from sharpened metal and explosives built in caves. Zixoth's squad was elite, equipped with the finest hegemony technology, but the humans fought with something her soldiers did not possess. They fought with joy. Not the joy of victory or conquest, something stranger, something Zixoth could not name. Even as they died, even as hegemony weapons cut them down, the humans kept coming, and they were smiling. 6 of Zixoth's soldiers died before she was overpowered. The humans did not kill her. They bound her wounds, gave her food, and marched her through frozen tunnels to an underground shelter. The shelter was unlike anything she expected. It was full of people, not soldiers, but ordinary humans of all ages. Children played in one corner, their laughter echoing off stone walls. Old people sat around fires, telling stories. A woman nursed a baby while a man read aloud from a battered book. This was what the hegemony was trying to destroy. Not warriors, not soldiers, just people living their lives in the shadow of extinction. An old human approached her. His face was covered with burned scars, his hands twisted from old injuries. He moved slowly, painfully, but his eyes were clear and sharp. "I was a teacher before," he said, his voice calm. "Then a soldier, then a gravedigger. Now I suppose I am a resistance fighter." He sat down across from her. "My name is Henrik. What is yours?" Zixoth hesitated. Giving information to the enemy was forbidden, but something about this old human disarmed her defenses. "Zixoth," she said. "Zixoth," Henrik repeated the name carefully. "A good name. Do you have family, Zixoth, back on your home world?" The question surprised her. "Yes, a mate, 3 offspring." "I had a family too." Henrik's voice did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. "A wife, 2 sons, a daughter, 4 grandchildren." He paused. "They are all buried now, in the field outside this shelter." Zixoth said nothing. What could she say? "During the collapse, I buried my wife first, then my sons, then my daughter and her husband, then one by one my grandchildren." Henrik's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I dug their graves myself. I carved their names into stone. I stood at their graves and I wept until I had no more tears." He leaned forward. "And then I got up and kept living. Because that is what humans do. We lose everything and we keep going. We bury our dead and we build new lives on top of their graves. We carry our grief with us like armor and we refuse to let it destroy us." Zixoth thought about her own people. When they lost someone, they withdrew. They stopped eating. Many simply chose to die, unable to face a universe without their loved ones. It was considered natural, even honorable. These humans had lost billions. Their entire civilization had collapsed. They had buried their children with their own hands, and they were still fighting. "I do not understand," she admitted. Henrik smiled. It was a sad smile, but real. "Neither did we at first. When the collapse began, many of us wanted to give up. What was the point of surviving when everything we loved was dying? Why keep breathing when the air itself was poison?" He gestured around the shelter, at the children playing, at the old people telling stories, at the ordinary humans living their ordinary lives in the middle of a war. "We found our answer in each other, in the graves we dug and the names we remembered. Every person we buried became a reason to keep fighting. Every loss became a reminder of what we were fighting for." His voice hardened. "Your people attacked us expecting to find a broken species. Instead, you found a species that had already broken itself and put the pieces back together." Over the following days, Zixoth was not treated as a prisoner but as a guest. She ate with the humans, talked with them, learned their stories. She met a woman who had walked 1,000 miles through radioactive wasteland to find her brother. She met a man who had rebuilt a hospital using nothing but salvaged supplies and determination. She met children who had never known a world without war but still laughed and played and dreamed of tomorrow. She began to understand what Henrik had meant. The hegemony had assumed that suffering led to surrender. That loss led to despair. That a species which had experienced what humanity experienced would welcome the peace of extinction. They had made a fundamental error in psychology. For the hegemony, loss was an ending. For humans, loss was fuel. Every grave was a promise. Every name was a debt. Every memory of the dead was a reason to keep living, keep fighting, keep hopping. The humans did not fight despite their grief. They fought because of it. Zixoth requested permission to send a report to Admiral Vethkaros. The humans allowed it, curious what she would say. Her report was classified immediately upon receipt. Its conclusion was too disturbing for general distribution, but the essential message reached the Hegemony High Council within days. "We have fundamentally misunderstood this species," Zixoth wrote. "They do not value survival above all else as we do. They value meaning. They value purpose. They value the memory of their dead. We cannot defeat them by destroying their cities, because they have already rebuilt from worse destruction. We cannot defeat them by killing their soldiers, because every death creates 10 more fighters. We cannot defeat them by breaking their spirit, because they have already broken and reformed into something stronger. The humans have a saying, 'What does not kill us makes us stronger.' We assumed this was metaphor. It is not. It is literal truth. I recommend immediate withdrawal, not because we cannot kill them, we can, eventually, but because the cost will be too high. They will fight until the last human is dead. They will make us pay for every inch of ground with blood, and even in death they will not surrender. We attacked a graveyard expecting to find corpses. Instead, we found something far more dangerous. We found a species that has already died and come back." Admiral Vethkaros read the report 3 times. Then he looked at the latest casualty figures. His fleet had lost 1/3 of its fighting strength. Supplies were running dangerously low. Reinforcements were not coming. And the humans kept fighting. Every day more attacks, more losses, more of his soldiers dying to a species that should have been extinct. He thought about Zixoth's words, about the graves that covered the earth, about the names carved in stone by bleeding fingers. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Vethkaros felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. Below him, on the scarred surface of Earth, the humans continued their war. They did not know they were winning. They did not know the hegemony was considering retreat. They only knew that they had promises to keep and dead to honor. And they would not stop until those promises were fulfilled. The war lasted 4 years. In that time, Admiral Vethkaros watched his mighty fleet crumble piece by piece. What began as 47 capital ships and 2,000 support vessels slowly became 30 ships, then 20, then fewer still. The humans captured what they could and destroyed what they could not. They learned to fly alien fighters within months. They reverse-engineered weapons that should have taken decades to understand. And they never stopped fighting. Amara Okonkwo stood on the bridge of a captured hegemony cruiser, watching Earth grow larger on the viewscreen. The ship had been taken 6 months ago in a boarding action that cost the lives of 800 human volunteers. Now it served the resistance, crewed by farmers and teachers and engineers who had learned to operate alien technology through trial and error. Chen Wei stood beside her, his one remaining hand resting on a control panel. He had aged 20 years in the last 4. His hair was completely white now, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. But his eyes still burned with the same fire that had brought him to that bunker years ago. "We have them surrounded," he said quietly. Amara nodded. It was strange to hear those words. For most of the war, the humans had been the ones surrounded. They had fought from caves and ruins, from underground shelters and hidden bunkers. They had been outgunned, outmanned, outmatched in every way that should have mattered. But they had one advantage the hegemony never understood. They had already lost everything, and that made them impossible to defeat. The final battle took place in orbit above what had once been called the Mediterranean Sea. The hegemony's remaining ships, 17 vessels, all that survived of the Great Cleansing Fleet, formed a defensive formation around Admiral Vethkaros's flagship. They were low on ammunition, low on fuel, low on hope. The human fleet was smaller. 12 ships, most of them captured, the rest cobbled together from salvaged parts and desperate engineering. But the humans flew them with a reckless courage that the hegemony had never learned to counter. Vethkaros opened a communication channel. His face appeared on screens throughout both fleets, old, tired, defeated. "Humans," he said, "I offer terms of surrender." Amara leaned forward. "We're listening. My fleet will withdraw from your system. We will return to hegemony space and report that Earth is not worth the cost of conquest. In exchange, you will allow us to leave without further combat." It was more than Amara had ever expected. 4 years ago, the hegemony had come to exterminate humanity. Now they were begging for permission to run away. She thought about all the people who had died to reach this moment. Dr. Tanaka, who had finally succumbed to radiation poisoning 2 years ago, but not before she had trained a generation of scientists in her techniques. Maria Santos and the hundreds of other pilots who had flown suicide missions into alien ships. Henrik, who had died defending his shelter against a hegemony assault, still smiling as the enemy guns cut him down. She thought about the graves that covered Earth, billions of names carved in stone, billions of promises made by the living to the dead. "Admiral Vethkaros," she said, "we accept your surrender, but before you leave, I want you to understand something." She stood up, looking directly into the camera that would transmit her face across the stars. "We did not win this war because we were stronger than you. We did not win because we were smarter or better equipped. We won because we refused to stop. We won because every time you knocked us down, we got back up. We won because we had something worth fighting for, the memory of everyone we lost, and the hope of everyone yet to come. She paused, letting her words sink in. Tell your council what you found here. Tell them about the graves and the names and the people who would not surrender. Tell them that humanity is no longer the broken species you attacked 4 years ago. We have been forged in fire and loss and grief, and we have come out stronger. Her voice hardened. And tell them this: if anyone ever threatens our world again, they will face the same fate you did. Not because we are warriors, not because we seek conquest, but because we have learned what we are capable of when we have nothing left to lose. Vethkaros looked at her for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, a gesture of respect that Amara recognized from captured records. I will tell them, he said. I will tell them everything. The hegemony fleet withdrew that day. Their ships turned away from Earth and accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, carrying their defeated soldiers back to distant stars. Vethkaros's final report to the Council was never made public, but rumors of its contents spread throughout the galaxy. Earth had beaten the hegemony, not through superior strength or technology, through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. 6 months later, Amara stood at the site where the first alien landing craft had touched down 4 years earlier. The ground was scarred with blast craters and burned earth, but grass was starting to grow again, pushing up through the ashes. Beside the landing site, a new memorial had been built. It listed the names of everyone who had died during the invasion, soldier and civilian, young and old. The list was long. It took hours to read all the names. But next to the invasion memorial stood another monument, older and more weathered. The graves of the collapse, billions of names, carved in stone by bleeding fingers. Chen Wei approached her, walking slowly. His health had been failing since the war ended. The doctors said he had perhaps a year left. He did not seem troubled by this. A delegation from the outer colonies wants to speak with you, he said. They're asking about reunification, about rebuilding a planetary government. Amara nodded. She had expected this. With the alien threat gone, humanity was already starting to think about the future, about rebuilding what they had destroyed, about creating something new. What do you think? She asked. Chen was silent for a moment, looking at the graves. I think we have a choice, he said finally. We can go back to what we were before the collapse, divided, fighting, destroying ourselves. He shook his head. Or we can remember what we learned, that when everything is taken from us, we still have each other. A young officer approached them, a woman Amara did not recognize. She was perhaps 25 years old. She had been a child when the collapse began. She had grown up in a world of war and loss and struggle. General Okonkwo, the young woman said, the council wants to know what we should do now that the war is over, now that we've won. Amara looked at the young woman. She saw in her eyes the same fire that had burned in Amara's own eyes decades ago, the same determination, the same refusal to surrender. Now, Amara said, we remember. We honor our dead by building the world they wanted to see. We take what we learned from our losses and use it to create something better. She smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first one in years. We survived the collapse. We survived the invasion. We can survive peace. She turned to face the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was telling other civilizations about what they had found on Earth, about the species that had torn itself apart and then refused to die, about the graveyard that fought back. The universe knows what we are now, she said. They know that humanity does not give up. They know that we carry our dead with us, every name, every loss. And they know what happens when you attack a species that has already survived its own apocalypse. Behind her, the sun was setting over the graves. Billions of names, glowing gold in the fading light. The dead and the living, bound together by memory and hope. "We did not survive because we were the strongest," Amara said quietly. "We survived because we learned that strength is not about power. It is about what you are willing to endure for the people you love." She touched the nearest grave marker, a child's name, worn smooth by years of rain and wind. "Rest now," she whispered. "We kept our promise and we will never forget." The stars came out one by one, bright points of light in the darkness, and on a scarred but living Earth, humanity began to rebuild. Not as they were before. Better,